Chapter 2. It hadn't even been 2 weeks before their team got the attention they were out to get. Chan was sitting in the office looking over old mission guides he had written to see which ones would be the best idea to start on next, when suddenly a mail popped up. It wasn't weird for him to get mail, especially not since it was his in-game mail system, but what was suspicious was that the mail was blacked out in parts. He realised what it was right away, quickly calling over Roy and the other team members. With 8 people looking over his shoulder, he started reading the mail. It was a simple mission invitation, like the one sent out when a player designed their own creative mission and wanted others to take it on. Not much information was given, only the date and time of the mission if they chose to accept it. Chan looked over what wasn't blacked out, slowly nodding his head. It was a pretty military-based style of mission information sheet, only giving the most important information, while blacking out any extra information that would be needed for the in-game form, but were extra information for the team. We have 24 hours to accept. It's a short window, and probably a way to sort out the teams. It was common practice to set a short acceptance time to see if the teams that were taking on the missions were able to assemble in a short time, and able to work out the mission as fast as possible. Especially if these people really were black market terror group supporters, they would need teams that they can assemble and carry out missions on the fly. Right after the mail appeared, Roy disappeared to inform the chief of the development. Yuta took over the computer to see how much of the blacked out data he could make readable, while Chan took Mei to go over in-game maps of the coordinates they were sent, to see if they could get a better picture of what possible mission could be there. It's all the way out in the desert. There's nothing there. Mei shook her head confused. I went there myself a few weeks back to map it out for a creative mission that was sent out through the Mapper network. She sighed, looking at Chan. The boy was in deep thought as his eyes moved over the map, smiling softly, when he suddenly realised something. How long ago was that mapping mission? He asked, turning to look at Mei. 2-3 months? She replied after thinking about it. That was right about the time your military assets were sent in the game to try and infiltrate the black market, right? Mei just nodded, looking at him curiously. How do you know? Khan was leaning over the table with a coffee cup in his hands. He'd overheard the conversation. Same, Diane and Talon both stepped closer, waiting for Chan's explanation. The only one that wasn't interested, or most likely already knew what the commander had to say, was Yuta. The mapping mission was given out by those who control the black market organization. Chan held up a hand to stop them from asking questions as he continued to explain. Of course, a team of military-trained people will stick out like a sore apple in this game. They were spotted, and since they were trying to climb the ranks, surely enough the people they were trying to infiltrate got wind of them, so they changed the requirement mission. It's standard practice to send out a mapper if you want to build your own headquarters or mission center. They take the maps of many mappers, compare them, see where the best vantage points are, and so on, and then build whatever they want to build. Chan shrugged, taking down his hand, as a sign for them to ask whatever they wanted, but his explanation was good enough for them to understand why he thought like that. It's a good thing you mapped the area, even if they changed it. They can't change the basic terrain. Chan, look at this! Yuta pushed away from the computer, pointing at it. Chan turned, walking over to look at the computer. Leaning over Yuta's shoulder, he started reading the parts that were now cleaned up and not blacked out anymore. That's weird, he mumbled. Next to him, Yuta nodded. That's why I wanted to show it to you. Chan turned to look at the boy next to him. Over the last 2 weeks, they had reached a truce-like working relationship, not talking about the past. They both had just ignored it, and Chan had decided that, for the sake of this mission, he would ignore the mistrust he had for Phantom, especially since Yuta really was a person he wanted to trust. It sounds like an old mission I ran. With a sigh, he stretched his back. Mei, the place you mapped, were there some old ruins? Like, really old? Mei nodded, pointing at a place on the map. Right here. Why? Chan shook his head, turning back to the computer screen to go over what he had read again. The title Commander was given to me after one particular mission. Back then, I was just a high-ranked loner no one really knew about. I got a mission invitation from an unknown organisation. It sounded simple enough, so I took it and gathered a team. Turns out the mission was different from what they had said. The mission was a battle royale against both other teams, time, and assassins. It was a bloodbath. Back then, only 2 teams made it out. One was my team, and the other was Black Shadow. Chan stopped talking after that and turned to look at Yuta. The mission site was those ruins. Back then, they were a tower, and the team that reached the top first would finish the mission. It was the beginning of Nighthead Gaming and of Guns of Angels. After that, missions like that were forbidden, and for a year the area where the missions took place was completely shut off. I didn't know they had opened it again, Yuta continued. Chan sighed, nodding his head. They might use the site exactly because of that ruin. It's a big underground tunnel network. He leaned back over Yuta's shoulder to reach the keyboard. After a few seconds, Chan hit the print button, walked over to gather the papers, giving each of them a copy. This is my mission data from that mission back then. Read it carefully and get familiar with everything that has to do with the tunnels. I'm sure they'll use those for the mission. The others nodded, taking the paper, looking at Chan and Yuta. May inhaled slowly before turning to walk out, coming back with 2 cups of tea, giving one to Chan and one to Yuta. She could feel the distress that came from both of them talking about the past mission, but she didn't want to pry, so all she did was give them the tea and return to her reading. The only person that knows all the information about this mission are those teams that survived. I don't know how the organisation got that information, but this mission will be tough. We only have a few more hours to prepare. Chan turned to look when the door opened and Roy came in. Let's all call it a day, and we'll meet back by nightfall. Get some rest before that. Roy smiled, waving them towards the door. You'll need your strength for the mission, and you won't get much more information than you already have. The car ride back home was quiet. It was like a dark shadow had fallen over both of them after what had happened. Neither of them wanted to talk first, and Chan was caught up in his own thoughts. Back then, he had gotten the title Commander not because he was that good, but because of his on-the-fly decisions and authority to get others to follow through with those orders without questioning him. But only a few knew what the title really meant. Most just called him Commander because his team had won the mission back then, and it was an impressive achievement. Turning to look at Yuta, he sighed softly. Back then, Phantom had been part of Black Shadow, the only other team that survived the mission. During the 48 hours of the mission, they had clashed many times in many different ways, which had been their first time clashing, and the root for their mistrust. It was years ago, before all the safety regulations Nighthead was under now were in place. It had been horrifying, and had changed a lot of things. The commander was once again standing on the rock formation, but this time he wasn't feeling the excitement he had felt before. Deep in his heart was a strong feeling of unease. Something wasn't right with this mission, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Taking in the view, he didn't spend time with the scavengers outside the borders this time. Instead, he went on to go back to the base. The mission meet-up time was only a few hours away, and he wanted to make sure that everyone was ready. He'd accepted the mission the second he had logged into the game. Now they all were out doing their own preparations. Time had passed, and the commander really had gathered a lot of information regarding the old ruins. Only a few of the old players that took part in the Battle Royale mission were still playing regularly, so it had taken him some time to find out about the ones that were still active, and narrow down who had given the information to the black market leader. Pushing the door open, he was welcomed by all 5 members of his team. Commander, we got contacted by the mission command. They've sent out the rest of the information. It looks like the mission is a retrieval of a person of interest. We only have a picture and a name, no other information. Phantom pushed the glass screen projectors over so they could all watch the hologram of the message. I went back to take a look at the area I mapped, and you're right, there is a new structure there. Balian continued as she pulled up her data on the holographic table to give an accurate overview of the terrain. The commander nodded his head, taking a look. I got some fast desert and underground functioning vehicles, and I upgraded Narmis's armor suit. Enya pushed herself off the table she had been sitting on. Good. Then Mang and Enya, take one of the vehicles and fill the rear. We'll need your driving skills and the sniper backup. Until we know exactly where we're going and how much of the underground tunnels we'll have to use. You two, take position here and give support. The commander pointed at one of the higher vantage points on the map. It was rather far away, but he knew that close by that point was an entrance to the tunnels, and Mang was good enough to shoot accurately, even from far away. Narmis, you're in charge of getting Phantom in and out of their main computer hub building. I'll go in with Balian and get the layout of the place. As soon as Phantom is set up, you'll follow after and provide backup for me, Narmis. I don't trust this data we're given. From now on, treat the target as highly dangerous. Giving out the orders, the others nodded right away. His gut feeling was right again. The commander growled deeply as he emptied the clip of his gun into the electrical monster that had just tried to take down Balian. Shit! Narmis, you copy? Yes, Commander. They flooded the tunnels with electrical monsters. They're really high class. Change of plans. We'll rendezvous in the northwest corner to get Phantom and Balian out of here, and then Narmis and I will go in blind and finish the mission. Mang, Enya, meet us at the exit point and take over Phantom and Balian. Quickly thinking and changing the plan, the commander gave his orders, turning around whilst changing his clip. It had already burned through 4 clips. With all the monsters down here, it was difficult to move, and Balian was a really good mapper, but not that good in combat, thus leaving the commander with extra weight to cover for. The electronic monsters were a speciality of the game. They were normally only found in abandoned dungeons or as guard dogs for rich organisations. They looked like a big ball of cables and metal, with 4 long extensions and no visible head or even front. They were extremely agile and really fast. Their whole body was covered in sensors, making it easy for them to detect any movement and even predict their enemies' moves. Even one of them alone was difficult to fight, and the place they were going to was filled with them. He would really need Narmis's help. As the team dealer, he was the best fighter and the one dealing the most damage, but not only that, he was also the one carrying the most weapons and good at giving active backup. The tunnel was turning dark. Without thinking, purely reaction, the commander pulled Balian to the side, firing at the shadow that was about to grab the mapper. In the light of the muzzle flash, the commander could see the electronic monster jumping back, avoiding the bullets, even though it was fired at really close range. Pushing the girl behind him, he carefully shielded her as he grabbed his gun with one hand, taking out his second gun with the other. Both hands steady, he carefully observed the tunnel, trying to make out where the monster went. Light flare! He didn't turn around as he gave Balian the command. She followed it well, and soon the tunnel was lit up for a few seconds. Shit! Every wall was covered in monsters. They wouldn't get out of here alive. With a determined expression, he grabbed both his guns tightly. He was going down with a fight, that was for sure. Just then, the first monsters jumped. Firing in quick succession, both his clips empty, he managed to get some of them to back off, and 2 were taken out. Commander, down! Suddenly, a voice was heard from the other side of the tunnel. Without thinking, the commander grabbed Balian, pushing her down, kneeling down himself, still shielding her. Behind him, a loud sound and a flashing light appeared and disappeared. After it was gone, he got up again to face Narmis and Phantom. Flash grenades with EMPs. Best thing against these monsters. We'll only have a few because those things are heavy, Narmis explained with a smile. Nodding in appreciation, the commander patted his shoulder. Thanks, man. You saved my life. Listen, I'll go in with you. I don't care what you say. You will need a hacker. Phantom was sitting on the back of the buggy Enya had organised, looking at the commander with determination. No, I can't afford to take you with me. I can't fight those monsters and protect you. With a sigh, he turned to leave. Commander, I was down there for 2 days. I know the place, I know the connections, and I know exactly where the data hubs are. You need me. Turning back around, the commander looked at Phantom. Yuta really chose his character to look a lot like himself. They both had a teenage bad boy look, with a soft, manly handsomeness about them. Of course, Yuta was wearing fewer hoodies and more dress shirts, but they did have a lot of resemblances. Their facial features were different, but the cross earring and the stylish necklaces were the same, giving both of them a similar vibe. He sighed again, looking at his clock. We don't have time to argue. Listen, Phantom, if you come in with us, then you're on your own. I'll protect you as much as I can, but I'll choose mission success over your safety, without so much as a second's hesitation. You understand? Phantom nodded right away. Balian and Enya were sitting on the back of the buggy, looking out over the desert as they were waiting for any commands. Right now, Namus, Phantom, and the commander were underground, battling monsters, and Mang was laying on the hill with his rifle, keeping a close eye on the complex they would need to infiltrate. I get why I'm sidelined, but why didn't they take you along? With your skills, you'd be useful, Enya. Balian turned to look at the other girl. Enya just gave her a smile. That's easy. Right now, Mang is the best chance they have at securing their way out. They need someone to make sure that he will be exactly where they need him, exactly when they need him there, and the one best for that job is me. Enya smiled proudly. The other reason was she was a little claustrophobic, and really happy with not having to go underground. But that didn't sound as cool, so she didn't tell Balian. Phantom was doing his best to stay in the background and move as quietly as possible. He didn't bother engaging his camouflage, since the electronic monsters would just look through it right away, but he still did his best to get as little attention as possible. He wasn't weak or helpless, he had his own guns and his own weapons, but with the way Namus and the commander were fighting, all he could do was stand back. They were like superhumans, moving with speed and precision around the small tunnel. With the little space they had, their teamwork was showing really well. The two of them had gotten used to each other's fighting styles during the many missions they'd done. With admiration in his eyes, Phantom was watching the commander move around. He really was amazing. Hey, do your work, the commander scolded him when he landed next to him, evading one of the monsters. Phantom nodded right away, returning to his keyboard. They were only stopping here because of him. There was an underground internet cable right here he wanted to tap into to get access to the complex. The cable was highly attractive to those monsters. That's why both the commander and Namus had to go all out to keep them busy. The commander had said he wouldn't protect Phantom, but right now he was essential for the mission, so they had to keep him safe. When the commander first had declared that he wouldn't protect Phantom, it felt like a prick right into his heart. But Phantom understood why the commander had made that decision, so he could just accept it. And seeing how he was running wild on those electronic monsters to keep them away from him, everything was all right again. It only took 5 minutes to set up the connection. After it was done, Phantom quickly signalled the commander and they started to pull back. Only 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes were enough to have both Namus and the commander sweating and panting. Fighting these monsters really wasn't something done easily. I've accessed the complex outer system. I will have to connect to the inner system directly as well, but for now, I can help you navigate through this and disable the security. Phantom stopped once they were out of the cable monster's luring reach, looking at his laptop. If we turn right and then left, and follow that tunnel to the end, we are right under the complex's outskirts. He pointed out the route. Then let's get moving. The commander took a quick look, nodding and turning to follow the path Phantom had laid out. I don't see any security parameters anywhere. Namus was carefully looking around while speaking. Yes, they have pretty low security, other than the monsters. Phantom answered, making the commander look back. Say alerted. They've filled the whole tunnel system with monsters. Don't expect there to be no other security. He spoke as his eyes moved around. It really was weird that they didn't find any other security other than these monsters yet. Something wasn't right. Something really wasn't right. These words were turning in the commander's head over and over. They'd reached the hatch that would lead into the complex, and still, other than the monsters, there was no security. It was just like they'd wanted people to take this route. Is there another route in? He asked, turning to Phantom. The boy shook his head. Just this one. It's a trap. With a sigh, the commander climbed up the few steps of the hatch carefully, looking at it, making sure it wasn't rigged or anything like that, before opening it just enough to look around. Nothing outside. I can see the complex walls and that's it. Ready your guns. I still think we're walking into a trap. He finally pushed open the hatch and stepped outside. Nothing happened. Confused, the commander turned to look around at Namus and Phantom. Either this is some bad joke, or they rely on these monsters too much. The other two could just shrug their shoulders in confusion themselves. The next steps were running smoothly, a little too smoothly, considering what kind of mission this was. Down the hall, and the first door left is your target, Phantom spoke. From here on out, he would stay back and let the commander and Namus take over. He would just be in the way. Both of them nodded and disappeared. Phantom's fingers were quickly moving over the keyboard. He was hacking his way deeper and deeper into their system. It was really fascinating what he found. While Namus and the commander were off deeper into the house, fighting with security and retrieving their target, Phantom downloaded nearly all the data onto his own system. Careful to not get any bugs or spyware, he made his way through the system, avoiding and tricking any layer of security he found. He was already a few layers in when he found something that had him stop. With quick moves, he downloaded everything he had just found, quickly putting a lot of really tight layers of security around his data. This wasn't right. But before he could get deeper into it, he heard the others come back. Quickly cutting the connection, he stood up. "Commander, I found something," he spoke up as he watched them lead their target down the hall. "What is it?" "The complete mission instructions. There is something you should see." Phantom opened up another file he had found, not the one he secured heavily. "Look at this." He showed it to the commander, waiting until the other nodded. Then he turned towards the entrance. "Enya, Mang, do you copy?" "Yes, Commander." "Get ready for exfil." Those fucking sneaky little assholes. The commander was cursing for a few minutes now. They had finished their mission and turned in the target and all the data to the black market leader, as per instructions. Fucking pests! They baited us. They didn't want to test the team. They just wanted to see if I'm really working with Phantom, or if it was just for show. Little bastards! I will kill them, one by one! Throwing a cup against the wall, the commander finally exploded completely. The file Phantom had found was further instructions telling them to find a specific set of system data in the complex's system, and turn that over too. Without Phantom, they wouldn't have found the instructions, and the data. The monsters were to keep the commander busy, and to prove he was really the commander, and the hidden instructions were to confirm that Phantom was on the team. Shit! They were after us from the start! They set up the mission even before we formed the team. Angrily, he turned to the table, slamming his fists down. They wanted us to team up. They were trying to get us to work together. Fuck! Fuck! They were baiting us into this mission from the start. Even if we hadn't formed a team, they would have gotten us to work that mission together to see if we could work together. The commander turned to Phantom. They were after us from the start. With that, he turned around, taking a deep breath. Log out. Waking up in the medical lab, Chan quickly sat up, taking a deep breath. This was bad. He didn't wait for the others to log out right after he was back. He left the room, grabbing his wallet and leaving the building to get coffee. His mind was busy, running around the information he'd just got. Well, at least now they didn't have to worry about getting close to the organisation anymore. They'd been after him and Yuta from the start. Sighing, he wrapped his hands around the warm cup, taking in a deep breath. He had to calm down. There was nothing he could do right now. Chan took again, another deep breath, slowly letting it out as he let his anger go. If he was still in the game, he would have probably gone on some rampage in some dungeon by now. But since this was the real world, all he could do was sip his coffee and let it go. The cup was already empty, and Chan was staring out the window of the coffee shop when someone sat across from him. Chan, let's go home. Roy gave us tomorrow off, since we got this far this fast. Yuta leaned with his arms on the table, looking at Chan with his head resting on his arms. Slowly turning his head, Chan looked down at him with a thoughtful expression, slowly tilting his head as his eyes were on Yuta without moving. After a few seconds, Yuta looked away, clearing his throat. "What?" he asked, sounding a little harsh and uncomfortable. "They have a reason for wanting us to work together," Chan spoke, still staring at Yuta. "They need you and me for something. I don't know what, but why else would they spend months to bait us like that?" Finally, he looked away, as if he'd only just realised he was staring at Yuta. "They're planning something big, and they need your and my specialities." Yuta nodded, finally able to relax again, not feeling those burning eyes on him anymore. "Don't tell anyone just yet. I want to keep an eye on this first. As soon as we have concrete data, we'll let the others know." With that, Chan stood up. "Come on, let's go home." Laughing, the boys were fighting over the food on the table. Chan was out with his high school friends since it was his first day off. They'd spent the whole afternoon browsing in one of the biggest game stores in the city. The place had been the one where the Nighthead had first been introduced, and all of them had come here, often right after school, to play on the first public version of the Nighthead, before the beta version was out, and they spent all their well-saved up money on that. Now the shop was providing in-game equipment and skill scrolls, as well as a retro game section, and a lot of other gaming-related things. After going through the futuristic-looking store, they were now all gathered around the table eating. 7 boys, all together, fighting and laughing over food. Really was loud, and got them some attention, but they didn't mind. Most of them weren't bad looking at all, and so the more people looked, the more their ego got boosted. "Hey Chan, why aren't you attending university anyway? You said you'd found a job, but you never tell us about it." Chan gave them a mysterious grin. "Me? No. Well, I work for a farming company right now." In-game points and item farming was the cover they were told to use when asked about their job. "I want to get some funds first, and then have some money to spend when I'm at university." He kept talking to keep up the pretense. "For real? When you told us last time, it sounded really mysterious. Is that why you formed a new team?" Chan nodded, already bored with the topic. Instead, his attention was on one of his other friends, who was talking on his phone with a soft, sweet voice, obviously inviting them to tease him, and that's what they did. It was already late, and the boys decided to finally call it a day and go home, since most of them had university classes in the morning, and Chan had to go to work. They were standing in front of the shopping mall, saying goodbye, and discussing how they would get home, since some of them stayed in the same dorm that some of them didn't. As they talked, a car suddenly pulled up. "Chan?" Lowering the window, Yuta smiled, looking at the other. Chan leaned down, one hand on the door. "Yuta, what are you doing here?" "I'm on my way home. I met up with some friends for a movie. Do you want a ride?" Chan nodded right away without thinking twice. Since the shopping mall was rather out of the way for him, he was happy to find a ride without having to take the bus and then a taxi. "Guys, I'm off," he quickly greeted, and got in the car. "They high school friends?" Yuta asked. Chan nodded, smiling happily. "Yeah, they are. We used to team up for a fantasy game when the Nighthead first came out. We still play when we have time, but they all just started their university semester, so they're busy." He sighed, thinking back to the times they would just spend hours in some fantasy forest, in-game slaying monsters and gathering items for new weapons and other things. "Did you meet up with your high school friends too?" Chan remembered Yuta saying he was with friends. The boy shook his head. "Not exactly. I never really had many friends in school. I'll meet up with some of my dark web friends." Chan just nodded. Wasn't really sure what Yuta meant, but he left it at that. "Pick you up again tomorrow?" Yuta asked, leaning over to look at Chan through the passenger window. "Yes, please."
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to Top Secret Chapter 2. I will put out Chapter 3 very soon, so please look out for it. If you're interested, please follow. If you like the chapter, please like. And if you have anything to say, please let me know in the comments. Further, I have another audiobook out at the moment called Rabbit in the Moon. If you're interested, please give that a listen too. And as always, thank you very much for my narrator, because he's doing an amazing job with this, and without him I wouldn't be able to do any of this. So thank you very much, and everybody, bye bye.